Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making so we can figure out what keeps us stuck and, more importantly, how do we get unstuck? I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today, I have Misty Hardison, and Misty is a family law attorney with the Rosen Law Firm in North Carolina. She's practiced law from small towns to the big city, and by big city, I mean the big city, New York City. Now she's back in North Carolina practicing family law, which is where her heart is. In addition to being a family lawyer, Misty is also a children's book author. She's written Why Did You Leave Us? We Loved You So, and Jake's Fridays. She's got another book in the works, and I am so thrilled to have her here for this conversation. Misty, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. And I'd like to start way back in the beginning. You're a lawyer. Why practice family law? You could have gone to lots of different kinds of law. Why family law?
I was always drawn to family law because I saw it as a way to help families. I didn't know if that was naive of me to think that, but I thought, I can help families that are going through a tough time. I can try to ease that stress as best as I can. I mean, going through a divorce is hard. It's not going to be easy, but having a good lawyer on your side that does more than just give you legal advice. And also, in some ways, is somewhat of a shoulder to lean on in times. I felt like I could really help families move forward in a positive way. And
That
it's
is
not going to be
beautiful.
perfect, but better, in the most positive way we can.
Well, very little in life is perfect, but we just
Very
do what we can do. And what fascinates me about you and what makes you really interesting is that you're not just a family law lawyer, you write children's books. That seems like it's an interesting combination. Why write children's books?
well, one of the reasons was in my practice, I thought about the fact that so often children, they're not around, they don't have any say so, which is a good thing. They shouldn't be in the middle of their parents trying to decide property and who's going to pay what. But I realized they just don't have a voice, right? You rarely see a child in the courtroom. You're not negotiating with children. And I thought, this process is hard for them too, if not the hardest for them. And what could I do to help them be able to talk through some of the feelings they may have with their parents? Because it's not an easy thing as a parent to say to your children, guys, listen, we might be getting a divorce. How do you even talk about that, right? How do you even open up that dialogue? That's a tough topic because most children naturally want their parents to stay together. So I thought, what can I do to help? And I just came up with the idea of Jake's Fridays because I thought, Fridays are an important day to probably just about anybody, right? That's the day, hopefully, you don't have more work. We can do fun things. Maybe we can go to a movie. And for children, a lot of times Fridays really change. It can be the exchange day. It can be, your weekend with one parent you may not see as much. And I thought, what if I could write a book where we could talk about how Fridays are going to change and what we can do to make it okay?
That's beautiful. And so once you wrote the book, how do you expect or would you like parents to use it? Do they just give the child the book and the child reads it, or and maybe what I should start by asking, like, what age group of children is this for?
Well, it really, I would say, is geared toward 5 to 12. And what I would ideally like, and so I've gotten a lot of feedback from parents, which is, and most of them has said what I've been hoping they can read it together and that they can talk about the scenarios that they may be feeling. Like one of the scenarios I thought about, and I talked to some of my own family members that experienced a divorce. Like, what were you scared of when you had to leave mom to go to dad, or when you had to leave dad to go to mom? And a lot of the things they were saying are kind of in the book, right? Will my room be the same? Will everybody feel the same about me when I come back? How will my pets be? Things that maybe as an adult you're not really as honed in on, but as a child, your pet, it might be the most important thing to the world to you, right? Movie night, that's like so important to you. So I try to think about, as a child, what would you be worried about if your parents had two different homes? What would you be thinking about? And, I think one main thing you might think about, well, where am I going to sleep? What's my room going to be like? So I thought, well, if the parent can read the book with the child, it would open up these natural conversations. not anything forced or it's just natural. And a child might say, well, that's kind of how I feel. How will you feel when I'm gone? Will you miss me? Of course, the parents are going to miss their child, but as a child, in a child's mind, you want to hear those things.
Yeah, that is brilliant because it's been a long time since adults have been a child. And I think that it's natural when the parents are going through a divorce, they yes, they want to do what's best for their kids, but they're also caught up in their own emotion. And it's easy to forget or not even think about what this feels like from the child's perspective.
And that's really what I felt truly was that sometimes the parents forget and they're so emotional and so upset, which is understandable. It's a huge loss, a divorce. In my mind, it's always I can't think of anything probably worse than death. May be the worst way is worse in my mind, but it's a very close second. You're losing the loss of a family, everything you thought you were going to have, some of your hopes, some of your dreams, and children naturally see their lives through their parents early on, and that's hard when that changes. So, and listen, this book, there's some scenarios where it won't necessarily be ideal if you have some parental issues, right? That may not be right for it. But most families that are, that are separating, this book will work for them and be able to help them address the issues of the two parent home.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that children experience that parents may not appreciate as much is grief. And I know your first book had to do with dealing with grief, how a child deals with grief. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's actually so. My parents and my sister, they died very close together in a very short time span, which was, I was older. I was in my 30s, but it was quite a shock, right? Because I felt the loss of they're not going to know my children. I won't have those things that I so thought I would have. And it was my way of truthfully honoring them in a way to sort of see the book sort of sees my children, well, my child at the time with my parents and the changes in life when a grandparent or someone in your life, you may lose them and how you may feel. So that was really what my aim was, is to one, honor my parents, and two, for children, because, in this world, sadly, so many young children do lose their parents at a young age. And I was hoping that it could help them sort of grab on to things they could remember that are happy. The book is geared at let's remember in the happy times. Let's remember what we had together and know that even though it's really hard, we're going to be okay. And whenever we're feeling down, try to remember what we had and hang on to those memories.
That's beautiful. And you're so connected to children. Why? What drew you to write children's books, to be fighting for children, to care about their voice?
Well, I grew up with a lot of children in my life, a lot of cousins, a lot of nieces and nephews, and I've always just loved children and loved being around them. I think they're just the light of the world. They're fun, they're funny, and they are really some of the most honest people in the world. My own son keeps me in check. He's 10, and I think he's more emotionally intelligent than most adults. And he keeps me in check. And I felt like if I could leave one mark on this world, because you're such a blip on the screen, right? I wanted it to be that I could help a child, even if it was only one. Just that they could, if I can make their life just a little bit easier, then I would like to do it. That's
That
really what it came from. And then when I had my own kids, I was like, it just sort of changed my perspective on loss, on what it would mean if my children were in a two-parent home. And I thought through all those things as well, and how and it really helped me write the book.
Yeah, it sounds like both books actually could work together for a child of divorce because they've got to be feeling a lot of grief and loss too. It's not the same as if their parent died,
Right.
but it's still got to be pretty significant to them.
And that's kind of how I've always looked at it, is it is a loss, a major loss that, yes, listen, of course you can get children in therapy and things like that, but children always want to hear from their parents. They always want to hear mom and dad reassuring them. They need that more than anything in the world. And whether it's, spending 5 minutes a night reading this book, taking them to get ice cream, reassuring them that you love them, that's what it's about. because that's what they need more, in my opinion, than anything in the world. And that's was the hope of the book. Like, and it's really been sweet. Some of my clients will tell me their children have quoted it to them, that because one line talks about, my love's going to follow you here and there. It doesn't stop just because you leave me, because children sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind, right? And they think, well, I'm over here. What's going on without me? And they need that reassurance of, you'll come back and everything will be just like it was.
That is so true and so important for parents to remember. And I know both of us, having worked in family law for a long time,
Yes.
we won't say how long, but a long time. We see the effect that divorce has on children and parents. I've never met a parent who said, "Oh yeah, I want to destroy my child. I want to rake my child over the coals." Nobody wants that. Everybody wants to do what's best for the kids. But yet, sometimes when you're caught in the throes of divorce, it's hard to know what's best. So, what advice would you give to parents, especially parents of younger children? So, let's say under teenage years. What advice would you give to them when they're going through their divorce so that they could really put their kids first?
Stop and think about what you're saying to the child and what you're doing. Stop before you say something that might feel good to come out. Dad did this and it's all his fault. Or mom did this and it's our fault. Or you can't go to that party because dad can't take you. Stop. Think about how your words are going to impact the child. And listen, and maybe at night you just got to go in the bathroom and scream real loud at the mirror and buy in privacy. But stop. Just think about that little heart and what you're saying, how it's going to affect them, right? Because they take every word a parent says so literally. So if I could say one thing, it's like, stop, think about what you're saying, and make sure that what you're communicating to the child is what's in the best interest of them and not what feels good to you, or stop trying to defend yourself. Because listen, your spouse could be dead wrong. They could be the problem. They are the reason you split, stone cold. We could place the blame on them all day, but that's not what the child sees. They see two parents they love, right? So as much as you want to defend yourself and to protect your honor and tell this child, look, it's all the other, it's mom or dad's fault, it's the other one's fault, it's not me. Don't. I have found children are going to grow up. They're going to figure it out on their own. The best thing you can do is love them. Don't say things you're going to regret. Hold it in. Instead of saying what maybe comes to mind as something negative, turn the tables in your mind. Suggest, why don't we read a book together? Why don't we go on a walk, or change the topic? If they, remember that every word you say they're hanging on, and that's going to impact them more than you know. And that's hard for people. I know. Listen, if I was going through it, it'd be hard for me.
Yeah.
But you gotta yell to your therapist, yell to your best friend, go out to drinks with your mom, anything, but the child doesn't want to hear it.
Yep. And what you said is so important.
Nothing makes me madder than for a client to say, well, my child has said all these things about the divorce and they're totally on my side. Well, now, how are they on your side? They're only on your side if they know enough information to choose a side. So keep it at a minimum. Say, this is for mom and dad to work out.
Yeah.
As best as you can. Now, listen, every case is different. This isn't a blank slate for everything. I get that. But if you can, just don't say things you're going to regret.
Yeah. And it's not even things that you're going to regret. I think a lot of times parents don't realize the impact that their words are having, right? They might not regret it because to them, they were just saying the truth, right? But to their child, that had an impact on them that could last for years and years and years.
Yeah. I just say don't say anything about it. A lot of court orders will say you're not to talk about the terms of this litigation, right? And that's a good rule. Just say we don't talk about that instead of falling into the trap of trying to talk about it. And I know it gets difficult, when you have older kids, it can get more complicated. And in that time, this is your profession. You're a coach and you give advice on these things that maybe, you you employ a coach to help you, or you talk to a therapist to help you navigate, because it is going to be more difficult with those older children, for sure. The questions are going to be there and so that's when I think a coach, a therapist, someone that knowledge and skill set can help you.
Yeah, kids, especially once they get to be teenagers and above, or adult children. I always say this to my clients, I don't care if your children are adults. There are some things about your personal relationship with your spouse that they don't need to know. They
No,
just don't. And the
no,
challenge is you can't unknow something. Like once your
no,
parent has blurted it out and then that image is in your mind forever, I don't care who you are or how old you are. You don't need to know that stuff.
you don't. And same true. There's some things you don't want to know about your child's life, right? When they're adults. Think about that. You don't want to know some of those details. But it's hard. And I think what you have to do is get up every day and remind yourself, because this is going to be tough. But I tell my clients, it's going to be a tough year, but a year from now, you're going to be in a different place. You might not be at the end of the road, but time is going to get you in a better spot. And it takes, people always forget, it takes some time to get in a marriage, and you can't snap your fingers and it be over in just the way you want it. It's going to take some time,
Right.
and it's hard.
100%. It
It's hard.
is. It's hard no matter who you are, but I'm curious as a fellow lawyer too, some people come into the divorce system thinking that they're just going to put their children on the witness stand and testify and the child will tell the judge, "Oh yeah, this parent did that and that parent did that." You and I both know that's not going to happen. The question is, do you think that's a good thing that children are kept out of the courtroom, or do you think it'd be better if they could tell their side?
By and large, 100%, I think children should be kept out of the courtroom. There are narrow circumstances where I think their voice may need to be heard, but I would prefer, if that would be the case, that it not be on the witness stand in front of everybody. If you could do it in a less intimidating session. I've been practicing law for 21 years, and I've only had one child testify, but that child was 16. I think there are times when you would have to do that, or a judge would have to talk to the children in chambers. But my thought is, it's just not a place for children. And also, I just truthfully don't know how reliable any child is as a witness, because they're so easily influenced by their parents. And I think it could very much be, they may say what the last parent said that they were with, or they could easily misinterpret situations. So in my district, one thing that is unique to our area is what's called a child advocate attorney. And if an attorney really thinks a child's voice needs to be heard, then that attorney, either you can consent to it, or a judge could appoint that attorney, and it would essentially be the child's attorney, and they would be the voice for the child.
Yeah, I agree. We have the same in Illinois. It's rare. But a lawyer could be appointed to actually represent the child and the child's interest. More often than not, we're either going to have a guardian ad litem or a child representative, which is a different function, a slightly different role. But the child could theoretically have their own attorney. The question is that a good thing? Like, why would you want that?
I don't think it's a good thing unless it's absolutely necessary. I just don't. Another unique thing, and I'm not sure if your district has it, a parenting coordinator is another avenue where you may be able to get to some of the details that are going on without ever needing to involve the child, that can help prove your point.
Yeah, so for the benefit of the audience who might not know or understand what a parenting coordinator is, what their role is, how they work, could you explain that a little bit?
So and it may vary a little state by state, but it's probably virtually the same everywhere. In where I practice in North Carolina, a parenting coordinator, you can either agree to the appointment of one, or a judge can appoint it. But you do have to have a court order, either
Hmm.
by consent or either a judge ordered it, because that parenting coordinator has to operate under the authority of the court order and their own individual order of what they can do, right? So their role is to keep you out of the courtroom and help you with day-to-day decisions. It's such as, should little Elizabeth get her ears pierced? Should we engage the child? The child in therapy? What should the diet be? Some of these day-to-day things that would cost thousands of dollars to go to court. It would take forever to get a resolution. They can make some day-to-day decisions. And they're such a helpful tool in many of these high conflict cases. That's where a judge is not going to appoint them in our state unless it's high conflict. But many times we will consent because we already know this is high conflict. So it helps you with those decisions on a day-to-day basis.
That makes so much sense. And we're in Illinois, we're pretty much the same. You need, a court order to appoint a parenting coordinator. And, so many people like they go on the internet, they do these Google searches and they're like, parenting coordinator, that's what I want in my case. But it really isn't for everyone. So I love that you pointed out that it's for high conflict couples, that can't make decisions for themselves. This isn't I don't know about in your state, but it's not something that's always or even usually done,
Right,
right?
right. And the other consequence too, obviously, or I guess you could use that word, is it does cost. And it can be, if you have a very high conflict case, I mean, I have multiple clients, truthfully, they couldn't survive without their parenting coordinator. The decisions are so, they never would agree, like on the extracurriculars or the things of that nature. They really need that input and that basically tiebreaker, right, to make that call.
Yep.
But it does cost. And if you're using a parent, not everyone can afford that. That's a problem in some cases, is the cost of it if
Yeah.
you can't afford it. And I get that, but unfortunately it does cost. So that's another thing you have to consider.
Well, and that makes sense too. It's like if you know it's going to cost and you can't afford it, maybe that's even more motivation to just find a way to work things out as long as the kids are young. Once they're older, you don't get a say. They're not going to listen to you anyway. But
Right.
while they're still under 18, you're going to have to find a way to get along and figure it out.
And if you can't, that is a great option and the quickest, really. But you're better served if you can try to work it out on your own. I guess the problem a lot of folks would say that is, well, I'm trying, but the other side's not trying, right? I'm doing
Yep.
my best. Why can't they do their best? So I hear you. That's a tough one. But if it really rises to the level where literally you can't make these decisions and the children are, there's a stall in whatever education, whatever the case may be, therapy, then you really might want to consider it. And I found recently in the last 6 months, our parenting coordinators are filled to the brim because there's so much need for it now, more
Yeah.
so than ever.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I personally have seen a major shift since COVID. I think a lot of things have, I think there's a lot of things have changed since COVID. I don't know if it was everybody being held up together, but it seems like the mental health issues are really on the rise. And I've seen that some substance abuse issues that maybe had been there before, but now have really taken a turn.
Yeah.
That's some of what we're seeing. And just honestly, an increase in the inability of people to just get along.
Yeah, and communicate with each other.
And maybe it's not COVID. It just seems like it was COVID. And then we're having all these issues. One problem I have sometimes is just finding availability of therapists.
I was going to say we have the same problem here in Illinois because the therapists got just completely slammed during COVID because everybody was freaking out.
Yep.
And now you can't, it can sometimes be difficult to find a good therapist.
100%. And that's some problem, they're full. And that's some problems we've been running into. It's eased up a little bit, I feel like, in the last couple of months. I feel like it's not been, but there for a while, I mean, it was very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And for those of you who are listening, I will put links in the show notes to some services that can hook you up with therapists, whether it's virtual or in person. And maybe that will help for anybody who's trying to find a therapist and can't, right?
Yeah. And then, sometimes a therapist is really good too to help you come up with tactics on how to deal with it. If let's say the other parent's being difficult, maybe to give you strategies. So instead of having a parenting coordinator, maybe you can do a 2-for-1. You can talk to your therapist and say, these are the things that's going on. Can you help me with some ways to approach this that might the outcome might be better. Help me figure out how to deal with this person to get a better outcome.
That makes so much sense. It's like I tell all my clients, you need a team to get through divorce. And somebody that, you want on your team is definitely a therapist and maybe a parenting coordinator, depending on your circumstances. But the more people that you can get and the more resources you can take advantage of for the benefit of yourself, for the benefit of your kids, that's always going to be best. Always.
Absolutely. And that though that your team is going to give you tools to help you better manage your children and the emotions that you're having and how to better deal with that.
Yeah.
It really does take a team
Yeah, I
to get
agree.
through it and come out on the other side. But the good news is you will come out on the other side. That's hard to believe in the beginning, but it will happen, and they're just got to hang tight.
You are so positive.
I try because but listen, it's hard. I'm not going to discount how hard it is. It is hard, but it can be made easier with the right resources and the right team around you. And most people are, they know they can feel if they've got it right, right? They know that they've got the right team around them. So that's important too.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Now, I know I want to bring you back to the book writing. I know you've written 2 books and you've got a third one in the works. Is that right?
That's right. I'm hopefully should be done with that pretty soon. I'm trying really hard. So I felt like there really was a lack of resources for same-sex parents and what that family looks like for children. And I wanted to have a resource that children could look at and talk with their parents about concerns they may have, feelings they may have. I mean, same-sex families know it's all family, right? It's all good, but you may experience different things and you may, have different questions about how things work in your life. And I wanted to create a book where we would open that avenue, just like with Jake's Fridays, to talk about that. And so they can talk about with their parents and things they may face at school, just like with any other child, how you could deal with that. So that's really the central focus of that book. So I'm really looking forward to finishing that up. So hopefully that can help, because there is a growing number of same-sex families and it's going to continue to grow, which is wonderful. And I want that out there for those children to be able to access.
Yeah, and what people need to understand, for better or for worse, now that same-sex couples can marry, they also have to deal with divorce. I mean, it happens just like it happens to an opposite sex couple. So having resources for the children of every marriage, of every situation is such a gift.
Yes, they all, that's the goal, just to help as many kids as you can so that they won't, they're always going to be impacted by the divorce, just like the parents. And that's the way, you're always impacted by things in your life. That's just the way it is, right? You're going to have, but the key is to come out of it on the other side as good in the best position possible and try to get and have something to get you through it. That's really just the goal.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Misty, this has been so helpful, and I hope it helps a lot more parents, that parents out there who are going through a divorce, or even if one of them is dealing with the death of a spouse, that they hear this podcast, that they grab the resources that you have so graciously created. Everything is going to be linked in the show notes. But if somebody wants to follow up with you, if they need a lawyer and divorce lawyer in North Carolina, if they want to find you, where should they go? Where can they find you?
You can find me at rosen.com is our website. You can find us there. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, the usual suspects with the social media. We're on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, I'm at rosen.com. My profile's right on there, and I'm there for anyone that needs me.
Thank you so much, Misty, for this. It's really been a great conversation. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you so much, Karen. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful. Okay, so for those of you out there listening, or for those of you who are watching, if you enjoyed today's conversation, if you'd like to hear more of this kind of content, do me a big favor, give the episode a thumbs up, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I look forward to talking with you again next time.